The afternoon sun catches the edges of freshly installed solar panels on a Spanish tile roof in suburban Phoenix, their dark blue surfaces still wrapped in protective film, waiting to be connected to a power system that will never happen if Laura Chen's HOA president gets her way. Quick note before we begin. This is a fictional, dramatized story for education and entertainment. Any resemblance to real people is coincidental. This story is inspired by common HOA situations people talk about online. All names and details here are fictional. Laura Chen, a 38-year-old Asian American woman with an oval face, intelligent dark brown almond-shaped eyes, shoulder-length straight black hair, warm ivory skin tone, a small beauty mark above her left eyebrow, slender athletic build, and a habitually methodical expression that comes from years of engineering work, had spent 11 months researching solar installation companies, comparing efficiency ratings, calculating return on investment down to the decimal point, and she'd done what she always did when making major decisions. She documented everything, kept every email, saved every proposal, and read the fine print 3 times, which is exactly what saved her when the certified letter arrived on day 3 of installation demanding immediate removal of all equipment. The letter cited Section 4.7 of the Cease-and-Desist, aesthetic standards requiring architectural committee approval for external modifications visible from the street, and Laura read it standing in her driveway while 2 installers waited on her roof, wondering if they should keep working, and she felt that specific kind of anger that comes when someone uses rules as weapons without actually reading them. What the HOA president, Margaret, a 62-year-old white woman with a sharp angular face, cold pale blue eyes, silver gray hair styled in a severe bob, thin lips permanently set in disapproval, pale skin with pronounced frown lines, rigid posture, and an expression that suggested she'd never met a rule she didn't want to enforce twice, hadn't mentioned in her letter, was that Arizona's Solar Rights Act explicitly prohibits HOA restrictions that increase the cost or decrease the efficiency of solar installations, and Laura knew this because she'd read the statute before signing her installation contract, but Margaret apparently believed that sending official-looking letters was the same thing as having legal authority. Laura called the installation company's project manager, David Rodriguez, a 45-year-old Hispanic man with a round, friendly face, warm brown eyes, salt and pepper short wavy hair, olive skin tone, stocky build, and an expression that said he'd dealt with this exact situation at least a dozen times, who told her 3 things. 1. They'd installed panels on 14 other homes in this HOA without issue. 2. State law was absolutely on her side. And 3, they couldn't continue work until she resolved this with the board because they couldn't risk a lien on the property. That night, Laura drafted an email response that took her 2 hours to write because she kept revising it to remove the parts where she called Margaret's interpretation willfully ignorant and legally incompetent, and what she finally sent was a calm, sourced explanation that Arizona revised Statute 33 to 1816 prohibited any covenant that would prohibit or unreasonably restrict the installation or use of a solar energy device, included links to 3 state Supreme Court cases, noted that the panels were installed per manufacturer specifications and local building codes, and requested written clarification on what specific aesthetic concern justified stopping a legally protected installation. Margaret's response came back in 47 minutes, and it didn't address a single legal point Laura had raised. Instead, it informed her that the architectural committee would need to review her application, that this process typically took 60 to 90 days, and that any work performed without approval would be considered a violation subject to daily fines of $100 starting immediately. Laura sat at her kitchen table reading this with her laptop open to the Arizona Solar Rights Law text, and she realized Margaret wasn't confused about the law. She was betting Laura wouldn't fight back, that the threat of daily fines would be enough to make her comply, remove the panels, and maybe give up on solar entirely, which is exactly the kind of calculated bureaucratic bullying that works on people who don't have the time or resources to push back. What Margaret didn't know is that Laura's engineering background had made her pathologically good at following processes to their logical conclusion, that she actually enjoyed building cases from documentation, and that she'd already saved every email exchange in a folder labeled HOA Solar Obstruction, Legal Documentation. Laura filed for architectural committee review the next morning, submitted every single document the CC and A.R.S. required plus 8 additional items they didn't require but couldn't reasonably object to, including letters from 3 neighbors saying they had no aesthetic concerns, a shading analysis proving the panels wouldn't affect anyone else's property value, and a comparison study showing her panels were less visually prominent than the satellite dishes on 6 other homes in the neighborhood. And then she did something Margaret hadn't anticipated. She sent a courtesy copy of her entire submission to every single board member with a cover note politely asking if they were aware that Arizona law imposed personal liability on board members who knowingly enforced illegal restrictions on solar installations. The architectural committee meeting happened 3 weeks later in Margaret's living room, and Laura attended with a 3-ring binder that had tabs for every document she might need. But what she found when she arrived was that only 2 of the 5 committee members had shown up. Margaret looked like she'd been ambushed by the other board members before Laura even got there. And the meeting lasted 11 minutes, during which Margaret tried twice to table the discussion until further research could be conducted before another board member, Tom Chen, a 58-year-old Asian American man with a square, weathered face, tired dark eyes, thinning black hair with gray at the temples, tanned skin from years of outdoor work, broad-shouldered build, and an expression that suggested he was done pretending this was complicated, finally said Margaret, "We consulted with our insurance carrier, and they said if we enforce this and get sued, we're not covered because we'd be knowingly violating state law. So unless you want to personally pay the legal fees, I'm voting to approve." The committee approved Laura's installation 2-1, Margaret voting against without stating a reason. But that's when things actually got worse, because approving the application didn't stop Margaret from finding other ways to make Laura's life difficult. 2 weeks after the panels went live, Laura got a violation notice for her trash cans being visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection day. Which was true, because she worked long hours and sometimes didn't get home until evening. Then another notice about a small oil stain on her driveway. Then a notice about her mailbox post needing repainting. Each one technically correct, but applied with a level of scrutiny Margaret didn't use on anyone else in the neighborhood. Laura documented all of it, photographed her neighbors. Violations that went unnoticed, created a spreadsheet tracking enforcement patterns, and realized Margaret was building a case to declare her a habitual violator, which would give the board justification to pursue more serious consequences. And this is where Laura's methodical nature became either her greatest strength or her fatal flaw, depending on how you looked at it, because instead of confronting Margaret or complaining to other board members, she quietly retained an attorney named Patricia Gomez, a 51-year-old Hispanic woman with an angular, intelligent face, sharp green eyes behind frameless glasses, short professional gray-streaked black hair, bronze skin tone, tall commanding build, and an expression that made HOA presidents nervous, who specialized in homeowner association disputes and had successfully sued 4 different HOAs for solar access violations. Patricia sent a formal demand letter to the board that did 3 things: cited the timeline of harassment following Laura's solar installation, referenced Arizona case law on retaliatory enforcement, and politely noted that pursuing legal action would likely result in the HOA paying Laura's attorney fees under state statute. And the letter ended with an offer to resolve this through mediation, where Laura would agree not to seek damages if the board agreed to end selective enforcement and establish clear solar installation guidelines for future homeowners. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. If you're finding value in this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you've ever experienced a similar HOA or neighborhood situation, feel free to share your story in the comments. The board meeting where they discussed Patricia's letter was the first one Laura had ever attended, and she sat in the back row of Margaret's living room watching 4 board members have a very careful conversation about legal risk, while Margaret kept trying to reframe it as a matter of community standards. But the thing about HOA boards is they're run by volunteers who have regular jobs and families and absolutely no interest in spending years in litigation over something they're going to lose. So when Tom made a motion to accept the mediation offer and establish solar-friendly architectural guidelines, it passed 4-1, Margaret again voting against without stating her reasoning, and 3 weeks later Laura sat in a conference room with Patricia, the board's attorney, and 3 board members, while they negotiated an agreement that took 40 minutes to finalize because everyone except Margaret wanted this to go away quietly. The final agreement stated that Laura's installation was fully approved with no violations on record, all previous citations against her property were rescinded, the board would adopt new guidelines explicitly permitting solar installations that complied with state building codes, and Margaret would recuse herself from reviewing future solar applications. And in exchange, Laura agreed not to pursue damages or file complaints with the Arizona Attorney General's office, which Patricia had quietly mentioned was investigating HOA solar interference complaints and would be very interested in a documented case like this one. Laura's solar panels have been running for 18 months now. They've reduced her electric bill by 73%. She's already broken even on installation costs, and 7 other families in the HOA have installed panels using the new guidelines. But here's what actually changed. Margaret still sends violation notices, still enforces rules with prosecutorial intensity, still makes board meetings feel like disciplinary hearings, but she doesn't touch anything related to renewable energy anymore. And Laura still documents everything, still keeps her binder updated, still photographs every interaction, because she learned that the only thing bureaucratic bullies respect more than their own authority is someone willing to match their energy with better preparation. After everything Laura went through, standing in her driveway with installers waiting on her roof, while an HOA president tried to intimidate her with legal-sounding threats she clearly hadn't researched, the thing that finally protected her wasn't just state law, it was her willingness to treat the conflict like an engineering problem with documentation, process, and expert consultation. We couldn't have written it better. If you want more stories where the unexpected actually happens, subscribe, and you won't miss a single one. Drop a like if this one surprised you. We read every comment.